This is the best podcast on affordable housing. And this is the best podcast on affordable housing investments because I get to bring on amazing guests with a huge, wide breadth and depth of experience. Today, we got Derek Leavitt from EYRC. And this is why I want to bring Derek on because he's got a very interesting story. I'm sure I'll let you get into it. But he's gone from like small lot subdivisions, like tons of projects in Southern California. So talk about the guy that knows his stuff, been through the trenches, got slapped around a few times. And then he also got to understand a lot about modular housing. And today he's going to help us understand where the pitfalls are and ultimately where modular housing is going forward. So Derek, welcome to the podcast, man. How you doing today?
I'm great. I just got through 2 hours of hair and makeup to be here. So hopefully people are watching this.
Dude, I need to get with your makeup team because you're shining, dude.
Yeah, no, Ken sends out his best people.
Oh man. Hey, let's get into it, man. Who for people that don't know you, dude, who's Derek? How did you get into this world of small lot subdivision, modular housing? It just seems like such a very specific niche, but man, there must have been something that led you down this path. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm a born and raised LA person, for better or worse. Went to USC, stuck around LA, and then had the bright idea with a couple business partners in our late 20s to start an architecture firm. Quickly realized that the only people that want to hire you in your late 20s are family and friends. So we got a little lucky though, because small lot subdivision, the LA's ordinance, launched in early 2025. We started our office in 2026, and we latched onto it. So, and within a few years,
2026, right?
2000, 2005, and we started in 2006.
This guy's in the future right now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm 20 years ahead. So yeah, we were lucky enough that we kind of latched onto it, and then within a few years became really known for it. We wrote a guide about small lot subdivision. So we kind of fell into the niche a little bit because we had to. And then once we did, we just loved the product. As painful as some of those early projects were to get through, it was a great product. But then, after 35 or so built projects, it all kind of came crashing down. Like, everything's in cycles, and it got a little too expensive to build them. It took a little too long. And we basically really had to figure out what to do. We were riding high, and then it was a big drop off of, at that point, we were also developing small lot subdivision. We were building them. So we had a lot of eggs in that basket, and then the basket broke and the eggs came crashing down. So we really had to figure out what to do. We pivoted to ADUs. And that's how I got involved in modular construction, which is sort of like chapter 2 of my career. And we joined forces with a startup company that wanted to scale accessory dwelling units, backyard homes, as sometimes they're referred to. And we decided to start doing those modular, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. And then unfortunately, that startup company went out of business in 2023. So it was a great time. It was a fun ride, but 2023, after being really a boss for 18 years, I had to kind of figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I'd been a developer, a longtime architect, and a builder. And so I went back to architecture, joined Ehrlich, Yanai, Rhee, Chaney Architects, which is EYRC. And I'm trying now in this part of my career to really bring back some of these lessons I learned, both small lot and modular, and bring them into my practice today.
Wow, so much to unpack there, but man, props to you for just keeping going, man. I mean, there's so many people that would have just got punched in the mouth a few times and just stay down.
Yeah.
And you didn't. You're here, you're talking about your lessons, and I'm so grateful that you are here to share the lessons that you have learned, because this now protects the people that are listening to you today about, hey, where are the pitfalls? What's happening? What's been happening? And how can I best prepare for the future? Because honestly, man, our kid's going to listen to this one day, and they're going to be like, hey, how did dad react? How did dad pivot? What did Dad do when things didn't go right? And how did he get back on his feet and continue to thrive, which is the most important part? So there's so much to unpack there, but you talked about small lot subdivisions, and you've been in this game for quite a while. So
Yeah.
I'm really curious to understand from you, what are the biggest changes, right? So we've had people come on the podcast talk about the new laws, SB 684, SB 1123.
Yeah.
What's sort of the biggest difference that you're seeing between the current law and the environment today versus what you were doing back in 05 and 06?
Yeah, I mean, Ken, I got to be honest with you. I sort of swore off small lot subdivision. The end in 2016, 2017, 2018, it was a rough time. We had multiple projects under construction. Then COVID hit, the projects got delayed. We were developing, the development projects didn't go that well. So I actually never thought I would talk about small lot subdivision ever again. I swore it off completely. But earlier this year, I had a conversation with someone, and they started, talking about the new laws coming out, and I dug a little deeper. I'd sort of ignored the new laws, and I got this like renewed sense of optimism in small lot subdivision, and here's why. So SB 684 2023 law, SB 1123, which in 2024, which became law middle of this year, really a fix-it bill on SB 684. But what these do that changes from what I call small lot subdivision 1.0, when we did it back at Modular, my office back in the day, is that now it's like it's a discretion. It's basically a by right process. So it's not this discretionary thing you have to go through public hearings, neighborhood council meetings, getting screamed at by neighbors, the whole 9 yards. And then there's just some other rules that are fantastic. So allowing this in single family zoning is a real game changer. That's, as we all know, that's the bulk of zoning in Los Angeles and California. So allowing that just opens up a whole new slew of properties to allow this to happen. And then my favorite one, which we'll touch on a little bit later, is reducing parking requirements. So in small lot subdivision 1.0, everything was basically driven by parking. You had to put 2 parking spaces per unit, at least 2 parking spaces per unit, and it really changed how the projects looked, how much they cost to build. So that changes a lot. And then lastly, I'd say ADUs. So ADUs didn't exist in small lot subdivision 1.0. And now some jurisdictions will allow you to add ADUs to the product, which I think is just such a benefit, not just from a development standpoint, but from the end user, the people that end up buying it, that can have like a home for an elderly relative, and they're in the same location. It's a real benefit, or use it as a rental unit.
Dude, I really like how you're being flexible, right? Because you talked about how you swore off small lot subdivisions.
Yes.
But you didn't. But just like any great leader out there, you take in new information based on what the environment presents, and you're like, does my old belief still hold true today?
Yeah.
And you logically applied a framework that said, okay, well, this is a lot different, right? Parking is no longer required. That saves you a ton of money, may let you get more density. So now you can make more costs. You talked about now it's by right. Help people understand, why is it so important that this is a by right process? Like in the old days where you had those neighborhood relations, like tell us what could happen, like make it real for someone, because I think someone that's never done small subdivisions or development, they don't know what it means to go through like a neighborhood meeting and get yelled at by neighbors. So help make that real for people. Why is that so important?
Yeah, you develop thick skin really quickly. You go in and you have people screaming at you. We had people actually threaten us. It got really nasty. And, we never had a project denied, fortunately, in all of the applications we submitted. So it wasn't so much the risk of getting denied, it was the risk of getting delayed. And delays. And first of all, the process was long, even if you did it right, and not even do it right, but got through it smoothly. It still took too long. But it was really the risk. There were a lot of appeal processes. So if someone didn't really want your project in their neighborhood, even though you had an absolute right to do it, they could appeal you several times. They could, sick lawyers on you, and basically just increase the risk of the project. When we're talking about development, it's obviously the riskier the project, the less likely it is to happen, right? Less people are willing to do it. So by de-risking small lot subdivision, which means now you submit a small lot subdivision project, there's a shot clock, the city has to approve it in a certain amount of time. That is de-risking one of the most major issues that we had in the first round of small lot subdivision.
Such a great point. I love that you used the word de-risk. And for me, when I first got into this whole world of real estate, I always thought about, man, what can go wrong? Like, what if this happens? What if that happens? And then I finally realized that I just need to quantify that problem and see whether or not I can still stomach it. And for us as developers, being delayed, that's real money every single month for everybody that's listening. It's holding costs. You're paying interest on the loan that you might have taken out to buy that land in the first place. And now you're paying maybe on top of that lawyer fees to defend yourself. If there's any appeals, you got to hire land use attorneys to appeal for you or handle those appeals. There are just so many things that people can put in place to stack in front of you that makes this uphill climb harder and harder every single day. So that's why I wanted to make sure I called out with you, because it's hard. This is why this buy right stuff is so important. And so this is so good. All right. So now that you're seeing 684 and SB 1123, I mean, based on your experience, like, are there any like big opportunities that jump out to you on what people should be looking for nowadays in terms of opportunities with the new legislation that's out there?
I think it's early days. That's what I always caution people. You know, like it's state law, but local jurisdictions are still adapting right now to what this means for them. You know, it seems like every few weeks a new interpretation memo comes out at the local level, meaning like the city of LA just released theirs saying, okay, we know this is state law, we have to allow it, this is how we're interpreting it. So it's early, but it looks, so far it looks promising. I think the interpretations that I've seen are pretty liberal, meaning they're letting you do a lot of things that I don't think people would think you'd be allowed to do in single family zoning, as far as allowing breaks on some of the laws that normally apply to single family areas. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity. Single family properties is probably the biggest because, you know, in small lot 1.0, that really targeted like medium density zones. So your RD 1.5s, RD2 type zones in LA. And so now it's like this entirely new zone has opened up.
Interesting. So let me kind of start at the high level. I know I didn't prep you for any of this stuff. Like for the people listening, dude, Derek was not prepped for this stuff. But I'm interested to hear from you, because someone out there right now might be saying, okay, let me go look up if my city or county has issued a local interpretation of this. So when you looked at the LA's interpretation memo, can you tell us, like, what are you looking for when you look through this? Like, what's the framework? Are you looking for, hey, what did they say about parking? Or are you looking for, what did they say about zoning? Just tell us, let's get into your head a little bit. What do you
I mean, I can get real specific if you want to.
Let's do it.
So one of the things is that in SB 1123, it's only permitted on lots that are deemed vacant. And so for something to be deemed vacant, that's a very loose word. And so how is the city going to interpret if something is vacant or not? Like, you cannot tear down something that's been rented in the last 5 years. That's known. Something that's rent controlled, you cannot tear it down. You can peel it out of the project, which is a different conversation. But how is the city going to deem whether something is vacant? Because if they deem that it's not vacant, you cannot use an R1 property. So that's a big potential pitfall right there. But the memo gives you a little bit of clarity. It should. I don't know if every jurisdiction is going to give that much clarity, but it says, okay, if the house is vacant means no one has lived there for 6 months. So you buy the property, no one lives there for 6 months, that might be deemed vacant, or the windows are boarded up, or the utilities have been shut off. So that's very critical. And then the other thing really looking for is a lot of single family zoning, and this is LA for sure, and I think a lot of jurisdictions, they really in the past tried to limit how bulky the building was. So there's a lot of strict rules that would be very challenging to do a small lot project on if those rules were upheld for small lot. But the state law becomes very clear that you're allowed these reduced setbacks. So it seems like local jurisdictions are saying, okay, you can do a 4-foot side yard, rear yard setback. And in a lot of cases, what I'm looking for is to see if you can go to 3 stories or not.
Okay, interesting. So what you looked at first was because based on the law, it says you can apply 1123 because it's vacant. I'm just kind of saying back to you because I like to digest it this way.
Yes.
So correct me if I'm wrong. And but LA issued interpretation that their definition of vacant is no one has been living there for 6 months. Is that what you saw in interpretation?
If I'm remembering correctly, I've been looking at a lot of interpretations.
We're not going to quote you. I think this is not investment advice.
I think it's less than that. And there was like a utility provision as well. Like if the utilities are shut off, that was another way to deem it vacant. So what it means is it doesn't mean you have to tear it down, because demoing something in city like Los Angeles is not as simple as it seems.
Oh, wait, you mean you can't just apply for a permit and just the thing just comes down?
It's not that simple, Ken. It's not that simple. There's a lot of notification rules.
And then you talked about they try to limit how bulky the building is. And for people that don't know what bulky means, like what do you mean exactly?
So how massive it is. So what these rules were intended to prevent were really McMansions, because we're talking about R1 zoning. And there was a period of time in Los Angeles, and I'm sure a lot of other places, where people would buy a single family zone lot and they would build to every single setback a very massive structure in an otherwise probably low density area. Not density is not right. Like, I mean, low density, but just smaller structures around. And they come in and they build to every setback a big kind of ugly box. And that's what really single family neighborhoods tried to prevent. So this wasn't even multifamily. This is building a brand new home in an existing single family neighborhood. So they created a lot of rules. In Los Angeles, those were mansionization rules to try to reduce the scale of neighboring new projects. So
okay, all right. And then you talked about height restrictions. Like, how should someone that isn't as educated in the world of architecture or zoning, what should they focus on when they look at height restrictions? Like, should they look at state law first, local law first? How do you go about that?
Yeah, state law doesn't talk about height. This is where the ordinance is a little complicated, and you really need to consult an expert at some level, because you're between two things. You have state law that states what some of the rules are, but a lot of times it defers to local law. And where it defers to local law is front yard setbacks and height. Those are really the two things. There's other things too, like there can be guidelines and things like that of like how the project should generally look or where the entries should be to the units. But deciphering between those two different authoritative regimes is an interesting exercise. And I think people are still figuring that out. You know, small lot subdivision in Los Angeles was under City of LA, and that was it. So you knew what the rules were. But if I'm going into a new jurisdiction, just throw out Glendale. I've not looked at anything in Glendale, by the way. But if you go into Glendale, because I mean, we're a region full of a bunch of small jurisdictions. Ultimately, like LA is the big fish. But if you were to go into a new jurisdiction, you would have to go find out, like, all right, what are the height restrictions in Glendale for this product type?
Got it. And you talked about setbacks. Just for people that don't know what setbacks are, can you tell them what are setbacks and when can you get a variance?
Yeah. So setback is really your distance the building can be from the property line. And so when you're talking about this, you're saying, what's the front yard setback? That's typically where the street is. Or so how far back does the building need to be from the property line that's at the street? Or a side yard setback from your side property line, rear yard setback from the rear property line. How far away is the building from those property lines? And you said variance. It's really more that the state law has said, the state law says that you can do 4-foot side and rear yard setbacks. But I am here to warn you that you have to be very careful with just going to 4 feet on the side and rear yard.
Because that's where you get the most objections?
It's more that there's a lot of, and I know we're here to talk a little bit today about kind of the unwritten rules of small lot subdivision. So all those pain points that I felt over, 14, 15 years of doing small lot subdivision, you can't always do a 4-foot setback, is what I'm trying to say. It's really going to depend on the property itself. And this isn't about catering to the neighbors. This has more to do with, like, you have to have room for things. You have to be clear of power lines. There's some big potential red flags that can bite you.
Ooh, okay. This is the perfect segue then when you said about red flags. I mean, let's start the most important one. Right? You've been a developer yourself.
Yeah.
What would you say is sort of like the number one mistake that developers typically make when they're trying to enter this world of small lot subdivisions?
I would say improper due diligence at the start. Not having enough contingency time. So I don't think that I think this product, although it is a continuation of Los Angeles' small lot ordinance, right? But it's new enough that I would be very weary of just buying something all cash, no contingency period. There's just too many things people do that, Ken. They will just go in and say, I want this property, I'm buying it all cash right now. I think it's a little too new. Like, obviously you want to work with an experienced team on what all the different pitfalls might be, but that requires time. So I would say, if you do anything, make sure you have a long contingency period, or as long as you can get. It's obviously a negotiation. We had a period of time at Modular where we were taking over several projects where they didn't know that they messed up until they had an approved map. So they would have an approved tentative track map, but you actually couldn't build it that way. So that's, like, I guess, the biggest mistake that can be made. Because if you...
What happened there? How could they have a approved track map, but they didn't realize they couldn't build it that way? What was happening?
Because the track map is approved by the planning department, right? But the person that gives you the building permit is building and safety. And sometimes these are called different things in different cities.
Yes.
Okay? So the problem is you couldn't actually build it the way it was mapped for various reasons: fire separation issues, no allocated space for utility drop, practical reasons, like there isn't a place to hold trash on site. So just like things that are not thought about, someone just is like, oh, I'm just gonna, this isn't that challenging. This isn't that much different than house flipping or this or that, but it's a subdivision process. And so building and safety and planning are not going to work together on your behalf, is what I'm trying to say.
That is definitely the takeaway I want people to take away, because there's always this execution risk. And sometimes that risk is magnified when you have an incorrect assumption where you're like, oh, they're the part of the city. There's no way that this planning guy has no clue or has no idea about what the building and safety department wants, because they're the same people. They work together all the time. How could they not know? And that's the same problem as sometimes when you have architects and engineers that work together and they're like, oh, well, why wouldn't the architect think about the utilities that way? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, it's part of the building. They must have worked together before. Why would they not know? And this is why there's so much coordination involved with development, is because you got to make sure everyone is talking to one another and not have the assumption that they're going to talk to each other on your behalf. Like, it's your job to make sure everything goes well. And I think that's something that's so missed so often when I talk to people, where they're like, so I feel like 50% or maybe even more of the problems that you face in development are like people problems.
Yeah. I mean, fortunately, I don't want to scare everyone. Like, you can get through these problems. Like, we were able to fix them, but sometimes you had to, like, resubmit a map or adjust a property line or something. But it's probably one of the number one things that we saw was people just not not understanding how it plays out throughout time. So you can't just say, I get a shot clock at the city, my map gets approved, and I'm home free. You still have to go through plan check, just like any other project. And a lot of things can come up during plan check if you don't understand when you're drawing property lines what's actually happening.
Okay, this is so freaking good. And I love that we started with contingencies, because that's how we start quantifying, or make sure we have a reserve for when things come up. Because I have never met someone in real estate where they said a project was on time, on budget, everything went smoothly. And if you have done that, if you're listening to this, you hit me up. You hit me and Derek up so that we can get you on a podcast. We're like, dude, how did you get on time, on budget? I don't want to call BS on it. Like, there's no problems. But let's go into some of the costs, right? You sent me a big bunch of lists where you talked about all the different problems. We talked about parking. We talked about setbacks. Let's go through some of those factors that might come up, that might cause issues, that might cause, honestly, financial problems for people. So let's talk about maybe just parking. You said that was a big one. So tell us a little bit about how should people interpret, why is parking so important? What are some problems that you came up or you think people should be aware of, and how did you overcome those problems?
Yeah, so when I got really into, looking at small lot again, I decided I'll, when at Modular in our early days, we eventually wrote a guide and we just published it for free. And the goal was just to get the word out. Like, this is not the housing crisis is such a big problem that this cannot be solved by by Kent and Derek, or it cannot be. It needs a lot of players to solve the problem. And so I truly believe that. That's why I do what I do. Is I like sharing information. And so I don't want people to have to go through some of the pain points that we went through on small lot subdivision, or any product. We'll talk about modular later. There's pain points there as well. But there are so many unwritten rules as to what can hurt you in this process along the way. So I prepped a list. I've been working on this, but with parking in particular, I went back and I looked at a series of our projects at Modular that we did, and I overlaid on there how much of the site, the ground floor, was taken up by parking. Everything associated with parking: driveways, backup aisles, garages, uncovered parking, you name it. And the results were disturbing. It takes up, and typically 30 to 60% of the ground floor plane is chewed up by parking. And this shouldn't be surprising, because when we had to lay out a small lot project, we always started with the parking. That drove everything. And that's because the parking, those are parking heavy projects. We had to do 2 parking spaces per unit, guest parking at 10 or more units. So yeah, your ground floor gets kind of chewed up. And the problem with that is that it's not just, it creates like a worse living environment, right? You don't really get a lot of outdoor space on the ground floor. Your living room is almost never on the ground floor, because really you have a garage, maybe a bedroom, and a staircase up to the 2nd floor. And so your living room is somehow 2nd floor, 3rd floor, sometimes 4th floor, if we had to go high. But outside of the fact that I don't think that's the best livability situation, when you have 2-car parking in these tight sites, you're trying to fit as many units as you can. You have to, or the project won't work. Aside from that, it's expensive. So you're spending a lot of time, units get narrow, you have to do like a steel moment frame at the garage. So what otherwise would be like a wood framed construction project, which is the cheapest way to build this product type, you have to put a steel moment frame in. You're sometimes cantilevering over the driveway, so you have another steel frame in that area. So yeah, it was problematic. But what I see now is that under the new rules, having 1 parking space per unit, or in some cases, you can go 0 parking spaces per unit, really changes the game. It's a much better product type. It allows you to increase density. It reduces your construction cost. So that's a game changer. If that rule didn't exist, I wouldn't be here talking to you about small lot right now. The parking is incredibly important.
That's so good, man. And I love how you kind of brought it back from the early days where you had to do 2 spots per unit to now 1 or 0. And
Yeah.
obviously, if you are the developer listening right
Yes.
now, you might want to talk to Derek and be like, hey, dude, do I really want to do 0 parking spots? Like, would anyone want to buy this home if I had no parking? That's a tough call to make. For me,
Yeah.
I don't want a home without a parking spot. Maybe I
Yeah.
can go without 2, but you go 0, then that's where you really have to figure out, if I build this product, will someone buy? Functionality wise, desire, like demand wise, do people want that? And sometimes it's not cut and dry, because every market, every neighborhood is going to be a little different when it comes to that situation. So you guys got to figure out, for this market, for this neighborhood, even for the street, even, is that okay?
You're absolutely right, Ken. That's
Getting
it.
an extra unit might get you an extra 300-400 grand of a unit, maybe 500-600, depending on how big your condo is. But if no one buys it, now all of a sudden you're bleeding money. There's always a trade-off.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the right neighborhood, I think you can do it, because ultimately we are an overparked city. We're an overparked country. There's a lot of parking out there. It just may not be underneath where you live. So, I mean, some neighborhoods have plenty of street parking. Some neighborhoods have nearby commercial. So especially if you're in a walkable neighborhood, right? I just had this conversation with someone yesterday. If you're in a walkable neighborhood, you are near parking lots, period. So as a developer, you can go say, hey, what if I were to lease some parking from you for my future residents that might be willing to walk a few blocks to their parking in order to buy a unit that is a couple $100,000 cheaper.
Big difference.
And put themselves in a neighborhood they would ordinarily not be able to afford, because you provided a unit with no parking that has a really nice outdoor space where you could raise a family in a neighborhood instead of having to move out to the suburbs.
And that's huge, especially if you're in LA and everyone tries to live where they work, because otherwise you're driving an hour to work every single day. It's a big trade-off, and you got to figure out what neighborhood you're building in. That's why it's always local. It's always location. So I love that we talked about parking. Let's get into like setbacks and side yards. Like, let's talk about the unwritten rules, because we talked a little bit earlier about you don't necessarily want to just build just because it's a 4 feet setback. But is it power lines and utilities? What's sort of the underlying tone, or why you can't always just go straight for whatever the lowest setback is?
Yeah, it's sort of all those things. I would say power lines is one of the biggest ones. Power lines, they're there. They're always there. We don't underground power in most places these days. So where are the power lines? And then, we also, took over projects where people built, small lot subdivision allowed 5-foot rear yard setbacks, and a lot of people would just go to 5 feet and they'd go up 3 stories and there'd be a power line there. And every utility company is going to have different requirements for how far you need to be away from, especially high voltage lines, which are those little skinny ones up at the top, right? So you have to maintain a clearance from those power lines. So 4 feet is not going to cut it. So I find, if there's power lines on site, and sometimes the power lines run down the side yard, sometimes they're in the front yard. You don't know. You have to look and see. And then there's a whole process. We don't have time to get into it today, where when you actually acquire the property, how do you locate those power lines so that you can still maximize what you can build? So it's not just saying like, I'm going to just go with a 10-foot rear yard setback. You actually want to get those points surveyed and figure out, like, if you want to, how close can you get to those power lines and stay reasonable. But
yeah, and sometimes don't you have to underground utilities as well? Like, is that applicable to LA or you're servicing?
Yeah, we had a project where it was so painful, Kent. We had to pay to do future undergrounding.
No.
Which means like we weren't actually undergrounding, but so we had a normal drop from the power line, but then we had to run underground utility runs, just empty pipes basically out to the street, so that in like our great grandchildren's lifetime, if they ever underground power to the center of the street, that they can use those pipes.
Oh my goodness. How much was that?
It was more that it was a very rainy year that year, and so the trenches kept flooding every day. So yeah, but it's just another thing. So and that speaks to your question about side yards. So you know, the way that you run utilities on these is really almost everything is done underground. So you have to have space to run all those utilities, dry utilities, wet utilities, sewer, water, potentially gas. Like you have to have room for all that stuff.
Whoa. Okay. So we talked about side yards, we talked about setbacks.
Yeah.
Fire separation. Not a lot of people know about this stuff.
Yes.
What problems can jump up there?
Yeah, that one's pretty, I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but it's again a big miss is like every time you draw a property line, you have to create a fire separation from that property line. So and all the architects in the world will know this, but they may not think about it from a property line. It's the same as if you have two buildings next to each other, right? You have to have a fire rating depending on how close those buildings are to each other, so that if one catches on fire, it can't jump from one building to the other. Or there's a 1 hour fire rating so that it takes time, so that there's time to put out the fire in one building versus the other. But the property line creates a fire separation issue at all times. So you can't just put a window near a property line, if you get what I'm saying. So you have to have space. So sometimes you'll have property lines that do weird jogs, and that's all about just creating fire separation, because the rules are tricky.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Let's keep going, because I love these little punchlines of just things that people need to look out for. How about trash? You talked a little bit about trash earlier, but this is a big miss sometimes. And sometimes I've actually seen city council meetings where they're like, dude, where are you going to put the trash?
Yeah.
What's going on there? What should people watch out for?
It's a couple things. I think there's this desire to, you know, we'll just put the trash, say everyone has a garage, or side yard, put the trash, your own bins. You know, here in LA, we have 3 bins for every unit. But the problem is, think about if you have 50 feet of frontage fronting a street and you have 5 units on that project, or 6 units, and each person has 3 bins. Think about what trash day looks like on that street. So when in the first version of small lot subdivision, the city, rightfully so, is like, you guys, you can't do this. You cannot, like, if you have a lot of street frontage, that's a different story. But most cases you don't. It's an infill lot, limited frontage. You can't have 3 bins times 6 units or 10 units.
Wow,
like being all brought out. You're taking over the whole street. So eventually we had to start doing a lot more private trash service with a dumpster. But again, you have to put that somewhere on site, and it takes up space.
So good. It's just such common sense things. But for those of you that are listening right now, these are the level of details that you should expect your consultants, your teammates, especially your architects, with someone like Derek to help you think through. And more importantly, someone that's been through the pain, so they can actually guide you through that whole process. Like, dude, you're not going to be able to do 15 bins out front. It's just so common sense, but you need someone up there to just kind of slap you around, but like, dude, wake up. You're like, oh, duh. I look outside and there's no way I can fit 15 bins in front of my house. There's no way.
Yep.
This is so good. All right, let's talk about stormwater mitigation, because I don't think a lot of people know about the things that are under the ground, but tell us what we'll watch out for when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah, so that's just, and again, that becomes an issue here because the sites are very tight. You're trying to fit as many units as you can. You're maybe going out to those 4-foot side yard setbacks or 5-foot side yard setbacks. And, you know, most places say you have to handle your stormwater. So, you know, I'm old enough to remember that you used to just take your stormwater and just dump it into the street. So if you live in like an older house, right, you have your gutters, your downspouts. So when it rains, like it's about to rain here in LA in the next few hours, everyone's roof dumps into a gutter, dumps into a downspout, sometimes just goes down your driveway and out into the street and into the storm drain on the street. So the cities don't allow that anymore, right? In most cases. So you have to retain all that stormwater on site. And that's fine. If you're in a normal single family home, it's usually there's plenty of space. but here you're tight on space. So it's something you have to think about at the very beginning. Where is that stormwater going? And you can put it in like rain barrels. You can put it in an underground cistern. There's a bunch of things you can do. And then to start, you can just reduce the amount that exists to begin with by not having a ton of permeable surfaces on the ground. So it's just something that you have to think about, because that, like, if you all of a sudden have to put a huge rain barrel in your side yard, like, and that's the way to someone's front door, you know, you have to plan ahead for that type of thing.
See, the thing I take away from this is there's so many details around this stuff. So we can go through so many more scenarios, but I know we want to get into modular housing next. So let me kind of transition the conversation with one final question about this.
Yeah.
How should someone pick the architect or the team to do a small lot subdivision project? This might be a layup for you, but I kind of want to hear from you. Like, if you were to go and hire and put yourself in the shoe of a new developer, like, what are questions that you want to make sure you ask to vet that you're hiring the right person?
Yeah, it's a tough one, because I don't like to be self-promotional on this, and but you kind of, I think especially in these early days of these new state laws, having experienced team is going to help. It's going to help you, because in most cases, like say we're outside of city of LA, there's most cities in California have never done a small lot subdivision before. Right? Like, they just haven't. This new state law, they don't know what to do. So having a developer that hasn't done it before, and then combine that with a local jurisdiction that hasn't done it before, so I think experience matters. And I know that's a tough one, because you want to sometimes go with someone and give them like their break on this, right? Like, we got, like, when I was in Motive, we got a break, right? Someone, when we were young, they chose us to do it, and it gave us our break. But it's also, there's some risks associated with that as well, in all these sort of unwritten rules that can come back to hurt you later on, or just the ability to go in and guide a city a little bit on how to get these projects approved, because a lot of them aren't going to know. They don't do a lot of subdivision work.
And that's so good, because I think assembling a team is so important. And that's why I bring people like you on, Derek, so that people that are entering for the first time, they can be like, oh, has this guy ever went through like a trash issue yet? But if they haven't, then they obviously haven't gone through and gone in the ring and got a few punches thrown at them, because these are real things. And you can ask simple questions like, well, why are you not looking at the power lines? Like, I heard on this podcast with Derek that they talk about the power lines, and you want to go 3 feet up where you're like touching the power line. That doesn't make any sense. And that's little easy introductory questions that you can ask today based on the intellectual capital that you've acquired from the conversation today with Derek, and use that to vet your folks. And I like to look at, when I try to look at a team, I was like, hey, you can easily go to public records, or you can go to your like city council meetings or local building department meetings and say, hey, what are the issues that come up when neighbors complain to them? Because then now you can go ahead and address those questions in advance and say, oh no, we're going to make sure that we have at least one parking spot, because everybody is reaming at everybody else about parking in the neighborhood whenever they're trying to build a project. So just go ahead, go to the city, even if they've never done it before. So, hey, look, I was there at the last meeting. I heard about how much there's issues about parking. We've already put in the plans for one parking spot for each unit at the very minimum. That can help you get a ton of brownie points in the beginning. And I like using the word brownie points, because that's what my daughter's using right now, and she's 4. But I'm all about the brownie points. So, all right, this is so good. I got to get you back onto, so we keep on hitting all these elements. But let's get into modular housing, because let's just stay at the very high level, because I'm not even sure people understand what modular housing is, to be honest with you, because we heard of prefab, heard of manufactured housing. Can you help us define like what is modular housing versus all these other terminologies like prefab and manufactured housing?
Yeah, for sure. And it's a great point, because there is a little bit of an identity crisis with modular housing. And the biggest identity crisis is that modular and manufactured, they both start with an M. They sound pretty similar. And so when someone thinks modular construction, and I get this look when I tell people that I focus a lot on modular construction. They look at me, they go like trailer parks? Like trailers?
Yeah.
No, not trailers. So manufactured construction is trailers. So manufactured, like a manufactured home is built under, and I don't know how technical you want to get, it's built under federal law, HUD. Most people have heard of HUD, right? So HUD approves manufactured homes like a trailer, which are on a chassis and with wheels, and that's how they're delivered. And that chassis has to stay on there. We're not talking about that today, but I just want to be very clear. That's manufactured housing. Modular, or as I'm talking about, volumetric modular, so think about a volume, is building a unit. You're building it the same way you would build it on site, same construction methods, you're just building it in a factory.
And what about prefab? Is that used interchangeably with?
No,
modular?
I mean, not really. You could call it prefab, but to simplify things, if I'm saying prefab, to me, that means I'm building parts in a factory. So like it might be panelized walls. So like I'm building the walls. Maybe there's even plumbing in the walls and electrical in the walls, and it has drywall on it and plywood on it and a window into it, but it's not the actual volume. So volumetric modular, I would put that under prefab or panelized. And then industrialized construction, which is really a newer term, is trying to encompass all of those things except for manufacture, not the trailers, but industrialized construction can mean both. Because circumstantially, it really varies as to when you want to use what system. So like volumetric modular, which I have more experience with than the others, there's certain times you want to use it and certain times you may not want to use it.
Interesting. All right, so that leads us into the perfect segue. Like, when do you think a project is suited for that volumetric type of modular housing product?
Yeah, it so just depends. So I'm a housing person, so I'm only talking about housing. I have heard people use modular for other things. I have a list. I'll go through the list. I'd say number one is hotels. Hotels number one. Very easy to do modular because you're repeating. Repetition is very critical. You're repeating the same unit over and over and over again. Hotels don't really have a kitchen in them. They're a little smaller, so hotels easy. Next category would be sort of like permanent supportive housing. So that's like housing for formerly homeless people, and then 100% affordable housing. Those are also great. They're usually bigger projects. You're repeating unit types over and over again. Student housing also is a great candidate for this. And then market rate apartments as well. So those I'd say are like the big five of like the projects that work the best.
Interesting. Okay. And help me understand the benefits of modular housing. Because I keep hearing everybody out there, they're like, oh yeah, it's going to be instead of stick built, we'll do modular housing. It's going to be cheaper, faster, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Is it really? And I've talked to certain people where they're like, hey, I've heard enough garbage about modular housing where every single time they pitch me a modular housing project, it's gone longer, or at the end of the day, at the end of the project, it's pretty much break even, same as a traditional stick built project. So what's your experience with that? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is a couple things. Number one, it depends. It depends on the team. And a lot of that, I think, goes to the commitment from the development team on modular. So you have to understand that the construction industry is it's a pretty archaic, slow-moving industry. Like we basically build pretty much the same way we did 100 years ago. And think about all the other technology that's changed in the last 100 years: cars, phones, computers. Construction, especially housing, it's not that different today. So asking for someone to make a change is tough. Everyone is very used to the way that they're doing it now, the traditional way of like, we're going to drop off a bunch of sticks on the site and then we're going to make something out of them. That's known. People know how to do that. So the problem is sometimes that someone wants a quick fix. I will switch to modular and I will save 30% in cost, 30% in time, and the quality will be better. That is very unlikely to happen the first time they do the project. Because there's just a learning curve, like you trying anything new. But I'm here to say, if you stick with it and you have a plan, not just a one-off strategy for one project, but like that you have an idea that I want to incorporate this across a couple projects, that's when you start to see some real savings.
Interesting. I love how you're setting the expectation there that, especially on a first project, there's a learning curve.
Yes. Yeah.
And you're not going to get 30%. If it sounds too good to be true, guys, it's probably too good to be true. And so what's the expectation that you're trying to communicate out there for people that are taking on modular for the first time?
Yeah, so to me, there's a third thing, because we always talk about cost, we talk about time, we talk about quality. But there's a fourth thing to me that's almost as important as this, and it's predictability. And what I like the most about modular is that when done right, and you have the right team, and that goes well beyond me as the architect, the right developer, the right site builder, even the right and the right factory, which is a very important thing. If you get that right team, you will know what your costs are early in the project, earlier than you would normally know them, and they're pretty locked in at that point. So one of the main things with this is, like, if you understand construction, you don't have as many change orders ultimately, which is a good thing. So a change order is like, you're in construction and they're out in the field and they're like, this doesn't work, this unit type, there's a conflict here and we have to change it. And sometimes that can be detrimental. The whole job site kind of shuts down while you figure something out. It costs money to pay the architects and engineers to redo something. That doesn't tend to happen as often. Not even close on a modular project that's done the right way. So there's a predictability. And then ultimately, I'm very interested in, like, what's next for modular construction, right? So it hasn't been massively adopted now. And I think in the next version of modular, it really is going to become more like a product. So, and when it becomes a product, then the cost will come way down. The timeline will come way down. The quality will be good and the predictability will be outstanding. You'll know the price of the units like on day 3 of designing the project.
Wow, that's a big difference. I love that you talked about predictability, because that's literally the opposite of risk. When you can understand what's coming down your path, then you can plan for it, prepare for it, finance it correctly. So you talked a little bit about factories, right? For people that, so let's kind of preface this with what I understand about modular housing. What I understand about modular housing is that people say, well, there's usually a big down payment. One of the cons of modular housing is that you have to put a big down payment as a developer, which is sometimes financially untenable for a developer, but give them a big down payment so that they can use that money to buy the products, to manufacture the modular housing so that they can ship that to your site. But if that modular housing company or factory goes out of business, then you're kind of out of luck. And all that money you paid in there, you didn't have any control over how that company manages their cash flow. So I want to kind of ask you, based on your experience with modular housing, how do you evaluate a factory or a modular housing supplier?
Yeah, that's a tough one. You really need to look at a bunch of things. First of all, are they building the right way that you want to build? A lot of times that's a decision, like, are you going to wood frame it or are you going to steel frame it? Where's the location of the factory? Is there a factory that you have to think of a worst case scenario. Is there a factory that can take over if something happens at this factory? So it's like a contingency planning. And I would say that's the biggest weakness in the industry. Like, Kent, you went right to the jugular. And the issue is that there are not enough factories. And I wish that more factories produced the same exact thing, the same exact way.
Oh, so good. That's such a great point. I like to think of it as like, why doesn't every bakery just make the same freaking good cookie? It's the same thing. It's like, that's the best selling cookie over there. Why don't you copy that cookie but then add your own special cookie on top of it? And in this situation of modular, that's a huge risk for me as a developer. I'm going to hire this modular guy, and if for some reason, and I've seen modular companies go out of business all the time because they can't fundraise, they can't keep the cash flow enough, where they go out of business and that developer's out of luck. And sometimes you're on a full personal recourse loan as a developer. They can come after your house. And sometimes that's a very big risk for you to stomach when you can say, you know what, instead of taking that risk and giving this big down payment, maybe I'll just settle for stick bill because I know what I'm getting. I know I can get the right people, and there's a bigger, easier backup plan for that situation. So I love that you acknowledge that, Derek. But I'm sure you've seen factories. You've gone on and looked at some couple of companies. So what's sort of the elements or the traits or the operational aspect that you're seeing visually that you say, okay, these people got their shit together?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's like any business. Have they been in business a while? That helps. So like, is there steady work coming in? Do they have capacity for you? So that's the opposite side of it. And that's where your schedule can get messed up. It's like, they're not going to go out of business, but are they over promising their capacity? Or are they not giving me a dedicated line in the factory to produce our units on? So am I getting jumbled into the mix with all these other product types, right? And then just knowing a little bit about their financial stability. I mean, this is a question that factories are going to get from anyone, I would say, in a due diligence period. But you have to do the actual due diligence on them to make sure.
Yeah. And for you, do you have a framework for like, what do you think when someone is like financially stable? So you talked about length of history. For someone that might not be able to objectively or understand how to objectively evaluate them, like, should they just be looking at the balance sheet? Should they be looking at their backlog? Or what sort of?
I think it's just a combination of a lot of those. I think it's a combination of a lot of those things. And then I think when you're looking at the factory itself, like, I'm a big fan of automation, and we're starting to see this next generation of factory now that is not just what I call building inside, because that's a big criticism I have of the modular construction. It's, it shouldn't be that you're just building the same exact thing, but you're building it inside, which, by the way, is still an advantage over traditional building. So like today, when it rains in a few hours here, like every construction site is going to be shut down in Los Angeles. But the factory down the road is going to operate. They're not even looking at the weather report. They're going to keep building. But the factories that I think are going to survive are the ones that have invested in automation, ones that automatically cut every stud, drill every hole, that like a machine does that. So it reduces the waste, it's efficient, it's fast. There's one person operating that machine, and then they're using machines to do all the nailing, to put all the framing together. It's just safer. I mean, the list goes on and on. We could have a whole other session talking about all the advantages of when you actually have a well-run factory compared to building outside the way we do now.
This is so good because I like using analogies, right? And I like to think of, I think people have heard the story of Tesla. This is not a promotion of Tesla, but we've all heard about how close Tesla was to going out of business. And so much of that investment was in their factories, trying to figure out, how do I get this thing to be pumped out at an affordable price, at volume, at scale, that actually can sell on the market, versus all these other EV makers that are coming on the market and they're losing money all the time. And this is the same thing almost for modular. It's like, who is investing in their factories right now for the long run? Not just trying to have a pseudo modular housing where, again, to Derek's point, they're just building it inside. And that's very different because that's how it scales. And they need to get enough orders to make sure they have enough cash flow, to make sure that they have enough cash flow to fund their operation, to get your product to delivery, because you as a developer might have delays on your own project. And if everybody starts getting delayed, at some point, they run out of cash.
Yeah. And then I think you just have to look at it. I mean, I think the way that we build now is pretty insane. So to your analogy, it's no different than if you ordered a car and someone drove up with a truck and they dumped a bunch of car parts on your driveway. And then you sat there for the next year while various people came to build the car. Someone came to put the frame together. Someone came to put the wheels on, to put the engine together. And then every time it rained, they're like, I can't show up today. And then someone would show up and they go, oh, I can't do my work yet. The person that installs the windows hasn't come in yet. I mean, that's how we build buildings. It's insane how we build right now. So my hope is that we can turn the corner at least a little bit into something more efficient than that, because this is why you said at the beginning, nothing is on time, on budget. That's one of the main reasons. Drive by a construction site in your neighborhood and see if there's actually any significant work going on today on that.
Oh, that's so good. I love that. That makes it really real for people.
Yeah.
And all right, so we talked about small lot subdivision. We talked about modular housing. What are you most optimistic about after we kind of covered all these topics? That someone, if your kid was a developer today or getting into word development, like where would you ask your kid to focus on?
I mean, I am a big believer in creating more missing middle housing. It's something that's been essentially forgotten for, I'd say, over 40 years. And in California, we're in a fortunate time right now. We're in what I would consider to be an upswing in potential for development. And that's because the rules are being changed. Like the NIMBY regime is pretty close to being over, Kent. You know, we've basically been underbuilding for 40 plus years in Southern California. I'd say all of California, and now most of the country. And it's going to take time. It's not an overnight fix, but the laws have been changing steadily over the last 10 years. And that takes time. A law passes, a fix-it bill is introduced. That's what 684 and 1123 are. One's an intro bill, one's a fix-it bill. And there's probably going to be another fix-it bill coming when people realize what needs to get fixed on 1123 for small lot subdivision. So we're at the period of time where I think small developers are going to be enabled again to do stuff. I do, like, while I work with a lot of big developers, I also work with small developers. I believe in small developers to help solve the housing crisis in California through small lot subdivision, through SB9, through ADUs even. That is the way forward. And the path is getting clearer every year. That people at the state level and even some local jurisdictions are now realizing that they have to free up the market is the only way to solve the housing crisis. And with that comes some amazing opportunities for people that I think 5 years ago never thought they'd be able to develop. They probably worked for a bigger developer. They're like, you know what, I like this, but I would way rather go out on my own and do a smaller project. But it's hard to do small projects. But now I think these rules, it's very hard. I've done it. It's painful. But I think these new rules are making it a lot more possible for that dream to become a reality.
And do you see an intersection between modular housing and these small lot subdivisions, or you think modular just isn't at the scale yet where it can accommodate such a small project?
I do. That's actually, I mean, I don't have an answer for that yet, but it's something I'm spending a lot of time on now. Is that I love the idea of taking the scalability of modular and putting it into small lot subdivision. Having, been on that side of it, where we were building a lot of projects at Modative and the pain points. So when I talk about like rain delays and inspection delays, these are all real life experiences that we had to go through. And I think there's a play there. I'm trying to figure out what it is. It may not be entirely volumetric modular. I think there's the possibility of combining volumetric modular with panelized, because if you looked at small lot subdivision projects, they're all a little bit different. Mm-hmm. So having the same unit type is going to be challenging, but having the same bathroom or the same kitchen, you can do that. You can pull that off. So that can be built volumetric in a factory and then combine it with panelized construction. So the walls get delivered to the site, they're pretty much ready to go, but it allows you a little bit of both. You have some standardization and some customization. And I do think there is an intersection there, and I'm studying that a lot right now. That's what keeps me up at night. It's exciting stuff.
Dude, this is so good, man. This has been such a good conversation. And I'll end this on this last question, Derek. And I think we kind of hit on this, but I'm really kind of curious to hear from your perspective, right? The reason I started this podcast 3 years ago is because, and people have told me, dude, you're never going to be able to solve the affordable housing problem. And I always said, I beg to differ. I believe that every single guest we bring on a podcast is just another piece of the puzzle. Even if I don't solve this in my lifetime, I get to pass all those pieces to our kids when the time comes. So the question is, why do you think affordable housing, particularly the lack of supply of affordable housing, has just been so hard to solve for?
Yeah, it's tough because I think, you know, I'm with you. I mean, ultimately it's a supply and demand issue, right? And I do believe that private developers can actually solve this problem if we actually let them do it. But how do you let them do it? That's the real question. So it goes back to what I was saying before. We have not let them do it for the last 40 plus years. Now we're starting to let them do it. But along with just policy changes, which we talked about a lot today, you have to throw in like how we're building things. That's why I'm interested in modular. Like, I love the policy discussion. I love small lot subdivision. I love talking policy. I love all the changes. But even once you enact all those changes and it becomes as easy as you can get a building permit in 3 days, which is a dream I have. But once you even get all those things done, you still have to be able to build it for cheaper, and you have to be able to build it faster. And ultimately, like, especially as an architect, you have to build quality product that people want, like something better than even what we have now. And I think that, so it's a long-winded answer, but it's going to take time. Like you said, I'm just here to do my part. Like, I'm a big believer in, like, all I want to do is do my part so that when I'm gone, these next generations, like my daughter's generation, they don't have to deal with the housing crisis. They'll be like, I don't even understand what that means. Like, housing is a very common available thing to us. It's not the number one stressor, I would say, on most people in America is how much their housing costs.
Man, that is such a good benchmark. If I can have my daughter say, what is the housing crisis? Just like how she's going to ask, what is a VHS machine or something like that?
Yeah, exactly.
Then I know that our job has been completed. And that is so good, man. All right. Hey, man, for people that want to find out more about you, Derek, or they want to reach out to you with a project, where can they get in touch with you, man?
That is a great question. So I am pretty active on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, send me a message there. You can also go to our website, which is EYRC.com. And you can also email me at dleavitt@EYRC.com. That's DLEAVITT@EYRC.com. And I'm happy to chat with anyone.
God, this was so good. Thank you, Derek. Man, I appreciate you coming on, dude. You shared so many gems today, and I'm so confident that there's going to be someone out there that's like, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. He just helped me a lot. I mean, just reach out to Derek. If you have a project or you have a consideration for a project, do some due diligence on your own, please. Like, at least look into the power lines that we talked about today. And then at least reach out for a conversation to see whether or not Derek can help you. I'm not vouching for Derek. I'm saying I brought you the first step. For those of you that are listening, it's up to you to decide, okay, I got Derek's perspective. Maybe I want to reach out for another perspective. But at least now you feel a little bit less afraid of getting started.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Kent.
Thank you, Derek. I appreciate it, man. And we are out.